Well, welcome everybody to the June edition of our little program here for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, British Columbia. And this month, we're going to talk about boredom. See if we can make boredom interesting for you. Anyway, boredom is important in terms of addiction and recovery. I'll tell you right up front, there's not a whole lot of research done on boredom. But having said that, philosophers have been talking about it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Some philosophers actually written extensively on it. Thinking of like the existential philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. But it's also been a popular topic with some artists. And anyway, there's a lot of this anecdotal information about boredom, but no really solid scientific studies up until recently in psychology. And even then, not a whole lot. But all these studies seem to confirm what most of us know about boredom anyway. So this month we'll look at some of these key pieces of information and how they can help you in your aftercare. Okay, so the first thing about boredom to understand is that it's actually fairly common among people with addiction problems. They understand the feeling of boredom. When I ask the fellas here, well, what do you do on a Sunday afternoon when nothing to do, your friends are out, whatever, what are you going to do? And inevitably, I think about 100% of the time, the clients reply, well, I'll go get loaded, because that's what you do when you're bored. Okay, so very common. Even Narcotics Anonymous makes this comment about people in recovery, and they say many times in our recovery the old bugaboos will haunt us. Life may again become meaningless, monotonous, and boring. Okay, and just for your own information, the research, what there is of it, backs up this idea that boredom is intimately linked with drug use. In one study, for example, they found that many people dropped out of treatment programs specifically because they were bored. Anyway, there is this link between addiction and boredom. So, and because of this link, it's important to get some understanding of what it's all about. So, one of the researchers I like, although many people have different theories on this, but one of the researchers I like is a fellow by the name of Richard Bargill. Now, according to Bargill, who's done these studies on people who are bored, there's this sort of pattern that emerges with them. And again, not 100% of the time, but enough of the time. And the pattern generally is, it's not necessarily that the person who's going to be really bored starts off being bored. Usually they have this goal. So they've got some goal in mind. I don't know, maybe they want to become a medical doctor. Okay? Just as an example. So they become a medical doctor. But then something happens on the journey to become a doctor that interrupts it. So for example, some of the examples given are maybe the person gets sick. So they're a young person, they get sick, it puts them back in school, all that kind of thing. Or maybe another common one from educational psychology is that somebody sits in a math class, grade 10 math class, right? And then just can't handle it, flunks out. And then they say things like, well, you know, the teacher was no good, or, you know, for whatever reason they didn't get through. So anyway, somewhere along the line, the pursuit of this goal has been broken. And now, rather than getting creative and finding some way of getting to the original goal, they shift and they modify their goal. But the problem is, if you modify your goal, are you really being true to yourself, right? Well, for these people, they're not being true to themselves. It's sort of like second best. And so maybe their heart's not in it. They're not really trying all that much. They're not really motivated. With the typical result that maybe whatever they're doing starts to get boring. And so there's even less incentive to do it. And the pattern then becomes, very often, these people become passive. They start sitting back. And one of the things they do, for example, is they will blame something outside of themselves for why they're so miserable. And if that goes on long enough, the pattern is they will start blaming themselves at some point. But whatever they're doing, the key piece is that whatever this goal is doesn't seem to be motivating them very much. So they stand back. And what happens when they do that enough times is that it's sort of like they're expecting something to pop out of reality or something, and it's going to fix the whole problem. So they sit back just waiting for something to happen, and of course nothing happens, unless they win the lottery, I guess. So nothing happens, and so basically that's their life, and it pretty much sucks. And so this is this boredom stuff, right? So there is a real pattern to it. There's a way people become bored, right? This is one of the key things. And if you look at your own life, perhaps you can see that. If you remember as a client here, the life stories that you heard, I mean, very often, whatever goal there was evaporates, right? Maybe somebody was being groomed for the NHL, right? And then in their last year of junior hockey, they blew out their leg, their knee, so they can't play anymore. So now what do I do, right? Or people who are retired, right? All these kinds of ideas, right? There was this goal they're shooting for, and there's a purpose in their life, and all of a sudden, no, it's not there anymore because of some external problem that arose, right? And they feel that this problem is out of their control, there's nothing they can do, and so modify the problem to choose another goal that really isn't all that personal to them. At any rate, that's our program for this week, and we'll be back next week with another little topic on boredom.